what do you get when you have a movie that's supposed to be about professional wrestling, but is hardly that? A movie that fails to deliver on absolutely everything it promises? Well, you have Body Slam, and we're going to talk about it today. You are on Captain Adam's VHS pirate ship, and this is Captain's Corner. Sit back and relax and have a good time. You'll learn a few things on Captain's Corner. It's Captain's Corner.
Captain's Corner.
Film reviews and home video history. Today's topic, Body Slam. Oh, Body Slam, what really can I say? The first and most accurate thing that comes to mind is disappointment. And this movie clings to every syllable of that dreadful word. It's a movie that is supposed to be about professional wrestling, and yet less than 25% of the film is dedicated to that premise. And why is it supposed to be about professional wrestling? Well, mainly because it's called Body Slam. One of the most commonly used maneuvers in professional wrestling, a term that is associated with professional wrestling. So when you have a movie called Body Slam, it better 100% be about professional wrestling. However, if you wanted to see a movie about a down-on-his-luck talent agent, well, this movie is for you, because that is what it's about. And you know what? It doesn't even really do that right. Yes, this movie is about talent agent Harry Smilek, who is down on his luck. He needs a fresh idea because everything else he's been doing just is not working, so he decides to represent professional wrestlers. And since he already represents a rock band named Kick, man, that's a stupid name for a band, he decides to combine the two attractions and take the show on the road in a rock and wrestling kind of thing. That concept alone is very interesting, very fresh, new. It's a bright idea, a movie that you might want to see. It would be, however, if they had done it right, because in reality, this movie is really, really boring, and it really should not be boring. I mean, how can a movie about professional wrestling and rock and roll be boring? But they certainly found a way to do that, and the pacing of this movie is so slow and drawn out. And yeah, there is some professional wrestling in it, but it's so few and far between by the time you get to it, it really just doesn't matter. For me, this was a hard watch, and it was pretty difficult to sit through. The jokes and the gags just simply do not hit. This movie takes forever to get where it's going, and even when it does, you don't care. Every time you think something neat is going to happen in this movie, it doesn't. Yeah, it seems like every time the pace starts to heat up, something else happens to slow it down. This film basically has no momentum whatsoever, and to make it even worse, there's a totally pointless love story in it. Yeah, to slow it down even more, there's a romantic angle in it that you absolutely will not care about. And mind you, one that doesn't really even go anywhere. It's totally meaningless to the story. And that story really isn't all that bad. Like I said, it's pretty interesting. It's just delivered in a very stagnant way. This movie really gives you nothing to care about, and the main character, Harry Smilek, is basically insufferable. I mean, you're obviously supposed to cheer for this guy and root him on like he's some kind of underdog, but it's just done so badly that you end up hating him. You really do not care what happens to him, and he was portrayed by the great Dirk Benedict of A-Team fame, which is pretty neat because you don't really see him in movies, and I kind of know why. Yeah, him as a leading man just doesn't seem like it works. Or perhaps it might have worked if there was just more to the character that he was portraying. But instead, it's a flat performance displaying nothing more than a sleazy agent template. There's not much to this character, and there never is. It's a poor example of a protagonist. There's no character growth, and you have no reason to root for him. You pretty much figure him out within the first 5 minutes of the film, and if you continue watching, you're not doing it because of this character. In fact, all of the characters are sort of like this. You just don't care about them. And sure, you're probably not watching this movie for the engaging characters, but even bad movies can have characters that you're at least halfway interested in, and this movie doesn't seem to have even that. It should be known that I was not expecting much with this movie, but I was expecting a little more than what I got. Well, for all of its flaws, Body Slam does deserve a little bit of clemency, because apparently the film that we got was not supposed to be what it was, and the original version of the screenplay was totally different, and apparently it was going to focus more on professional wrestling and less on the Harry Smilek character. So it was supposed to be a film about professional wrestling that contained more than 25% of professional wrestling. What happened? Yeah, what gives? Well, there's a lot of moving parts here, so I'll briefly sum it up. Oh, no good. Director Hal Needham, yes, the Hal Needham, director behind Cannonball Run, Smokey and the Bandit, Red, Megaforce. Well, anyways, he and the producers of this film could not see eye to eye on how this movie was supposed to play out. The story goes that the producers did not think that a movie that was all about professional wrestling would do very well, which is pretty stupid because at this point in time, professional wrestling was gaining plenty of mainstream steam. So basically, they forced a screenplay change to alter the concept of the movie. For better or worse, and geez, I really couldn't see how it could get any worse, the original version of this film was apparently going to be completely different. But the producers got in the way, and that caused plenty of contention, and we got a shitty movie. In fact, the contention was so high that Dirk Benedict actually got into a physical altercation with one of the producers. Adding to that, the entire production was mired with problems, ranging from last-minute script changes to budget difficulties to lawsuits. All of this slowed production to a crawl, and a movie that was supposed to be released in the summer of '86 wasn't released until November of that same year. So this was supposed to be a big summer blockbuster with a major nationwide theatrical release. Instead, it had a limited run in select theaters, and we all know what that means. Stinker. All of that is how the legend goes, and for all I know, it could just be a cop-out for making a terrible movie. Regardless of that, it was still released in select theaters November 23rd, 1986. Not that anyone really noticed, and the marketing for this was supposed to be huge as well, but it took a shit. Yeah, given the complications of its release, the marketing really went nowhere for this. There was a nice fancy poster that was supposed to be displayed in theaters for this, but basically nobody saw it. Yeah, because of its limited distribution, no one really even knew about this poster, let alone the movie. There was a preview for this, meant to be shown on television multiple times for plenty of people to see, but instead it was relegated to random late night spots when nobody was watching. So basically, the marketing for this movie was a total ghost, which really is a shame because the preview does a pretty good job explaining what this movie is actually about. But your preview won't do any good if nobody sees it, and the poster, which even less people saw, does a pretty fair job capturing the film's premise. But still, this does not scream professional wrestling to me, and again, why is it called Body Slam? I don't know, it just seems so out of place. Do you think of professional wrestling when you see this poster? No, you don't. That is because this poster has absolutely nothing to do with professional wrestling. But because the film is called Body Slam, the whole thing is so confusing. If it were called anything else, I don't know, something like Totally Booked, then it would be a little different. You know, since the movie is about a booking agent or talent representative or whatever you want to call him, shouldn't you call the movie something more like that? But I guess, what's in a name?
Well, everything, that's what.
Yes, titles are very important, and I'm not saying that if this movie was called something else, it would have been better. I'm just saying it would have softened your expectations. Certainly mine. Body Slam basically had no life in theaters, so they shifted the marketing focus to the home video. And the VHS is how most people know of this movie. Looks familiar, doesn't it? Yeah, this was on shelves in video stores everywhere, and everyone saw this tape. And it was rather profitable based on rentals. But that profit margin is solely because of deceptive marketing. Yes, such a tactic worked pretty well here, and as you can see, the picture on the slipcase of the VHS is entirely, totally, and completely different from the movie poster. Jeez, is this even the same movie? Yes, it is, and it's not unheard of for a VHS tape to have entirely different cover art than the original poster, but this is taking that to a whole new level. With this imagery, they went full throttle with, hey, this movie is about professional wrestling. Pair that with the fact that it's called Body Slam, the viewer has no choice but to say, hey, this is a movie about professional wrestling. And then you watch it and you're like, hey, this kinda isn't a movie about professional wrestling. The cover art totally pulls you and fools you. It's the old pull and fool. But that is the point, isn't it? And this worked rather well. After all, marketing is basically lying, but there is a level of acceptable deceit, and this goes far beyond that. Because what this imagery depicts doesn't happen in the movie. I don't even know who this is. He's not in the film, and there aren't any boobies. And while this imagery does work to get your attention, it's a total lie. And even though the original poster's imagery has nothing that would tell you this movie is about professional wrestling, at least it was truthful about what this film really is. So yeah, they went with a totally different marketing approach for the North American VHS. And though I think it's pretty laughable, I certainly don't blame them. I do understand. The imagery on the VHS cover is what they thought people wanted to see, but the funny part is, if you watch this this movie, you don't see this. But that's marketing. They wanted your attention just enough to get your money, and they really do not care if you were disappointed in the film. The VHS in question here is the 1988 Nelson Entertainment home video distribution, and it is the only North American VHS distribution, but there were two different versions of this, and the difference is upon the cassette itself. One was released solely by Nelson Entertainment home video, and the other was released with the help of Charter Entertainment home video. Home video distributors would do this sort of thing for a variety of reasons, and most of them don't make any sense. And for VHS collectors, this can be rather confusing, because you might think there's only one distribution of a movie, when it turns out there is only one, but there's more than one of that one. And this Body Slam VHS is a prime example of that. And it's all a story of subsidiaries. Here's a story of subsidiaries. And it all begins with the home video distributor, Embassy Home Entertainment. Why? Well, I'll tell you. Embassy Home Entertainment was the parent company of Charter Entertainment. And Coca-Cola, who owned Embassy Home Entertainment, yes, you heard me correctly, there was a time when Coca-Cola had a home video division, sold Embassy Home Entertainment to Nelson Entertainment in 1986. Having no further use of another home video subdivision, Nelson would shut down Charter in 1988, absorbing all the properties therein. They would then reissue all of those said properties under their sole distribution. Since the Body Slam VHS was released in '88, that would mean that the Charter Entertainment co-distribution would be the original Body Slam VHS. I mean, it would have to be, right? I guess, but it doesn't really matter. So, Body Slam is a movie with a deceptive title that has a VHS with deceptive cover art, and even the tagline is deceptive. Grab a ringside seat for a two-fisted dose of sex, thugs, and rock and roll. And while that's clever and exciting, it's also totally bogus. There really isn't anything in this movie that could be considered two-fisted, and yeah, I guess there's thugs in it, and there certainly is rock and roll, but there's no sex. You combine that with the imagery of hinted titty flashing, and you might think this movie is an 80s raunch comedy, in which there were plenty of, but this isn't one of them. Yeah, it's rated PG. There's no raunch in it. This is a total failure to raunch. This film is totally family-friendly, but you could not tell that from the VHS cover. So not only is this VHS cover art a total lie, but I'm sure it also hurt their profits. Kids were huge fans of wrestling, and think of all the parents that would not rent this for their kid because they thought it was going to be too raunchy. You know, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but isn't that the point of a cover? The Body Slam North American VHS cover art is exciting and attention-getting, but it's also a total falsehood. The cover art for the UK VHS by Castle Home Video is sort of exciting, I guess. But you know what? It actually contains imagery from the movie. Wow!
Oh, my
what?
gosh,
I didn't know you could do that. To me, this cover art is a little lame, but at least it's from the film. And it's pretty honest because it does give you a good idea about this film, more so than the actual poster. This VHS cover art gives Harry Smilek a large portion of the imagery real estate. And the professional wrestlers who are actually in the film only take up a small portion of the cover, which tells you that this film is more about Harry Smilek than it is about wrestling. And that's pretty accurate. And the original poster is truthful in that Harry Smilek is the focal point of the film, but this poster features no wrestling or anything associated with wrestling. So it's truthful but not accurate because though it doesn't have much of it, the film does contain some professional wrestling. The US VHS cover art tells you that this movie is all about wrestling, brother. And titties too, apparently. But as we've established, none of this is true because none of this happens in the film. I know this was a marketing ploy and all, but you still could have done something like this with the people that are actually in the movie. The movie is basically all about Harry Smilek, who was played by Dirk Benedict. You couldn't put him on the cover? No. How about Rowdy Roddy Piper? He was a big star, and he's a huge part of this movie. You couldn't put him on the cover? Nah. Okay, well, how about Captain Lou Albano? He was a big star. He plays a huge part in this movie. He's like the villain. Couldn't you put him on the cover? Tempting, but no. All right, well, how about Sam Fatu, otherwise known as the Tonga Kid? He was a pretty big star. He's in this movie, plays a rather big part. Could he be on the cover? I don't know. No. All right, well, how about Afonseca or Tejo Khan or the Barbarian? or Classy Freddie Blassie, or Bruno Sammartino, or Ric Flair? Why aren't they on the cover? They're all in this movie! Gee, I'd really like to, but I just couldn't. That would make too much sense. Yes, all of those wrestlers I just mentioned are in this movie. Some of them have bit parts, but they are in this film. Now, there might have been some kind of copyright issues or image licensing rights that would have kept them off the cover of this VHS. I don't know. I want to hope so, because that would actually make sense. And that more than likely was the case. But part of me wants to think that this was just sheer dunderheadedness. And if it wasn't a copyright thing, why at least isn't Roddy Piper on this? He wasn't even on the original poster. He was a big deal, and he plays a major part in this film. Not to mention, Charles Nelson Riley and Billy Barty are both in this film, and actually they're sort of the best part about it. Why aren't they on any poster? I could have put them on somewhere. I mean, come on, Billy Barty wasn't going to take up too much room. And it's not a party until you got Billy Barty. The US VHS slipcover is just weird. Out of all the stuff they had to work with, they went with this. They just made something up instead of using stuff they already had. Like I said, it might have been because of some kind of copyright thing, at least I hope so, but something tells me it wasn't. It just seems like everything about this movie was cursed from the beginning, and maybe it just should not have been made. Certainly not made the way it was, but that's what we got. To me, disappointment is the best word that sums up Body Slam. And I realize that there's lots of folks out there who do enjoy this movie. I don't see how, but that's okay. Everyone has their own opinion. To me, however, this movie was just wretchedly disappointing. To be clear here, I was not expecting The Godfather with this movie, but what I was expecting was a silly, goofy 80s comedy about wrestling. It obviously was supposed to be that, but its delivery is so poor that it just doesn't work, which is a complete shame, because we could have used a movie that was like what this was supposed to be. Because it is a fresh idea. It's a unique concept. It would have been great. It was just done so horribly. To me, there are very few good parts to this movie. Very few. It's interesting to see the Barbarian in a movie, because you're just never going to see that. In fact, with the exception of Roddy Piper, that's true for all of the wrestlers that appear in this film. I mean, come on, when's the last time you saw Ric Flair in a movie? Woo! But still, though, it's like seeing Ric Flair in a big pile of poo. The concept of this movie is pretty great, it's just not applied very well. And this movie does have a very fun spirit about it, it just doesn't really come through. And that's just not a lot to hang your hat on, is it? If you like Body Slam, well, that's your opinion. And now you clearly know mine. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this edition of Captain's Corner. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe. Take care out there, and keep it locked right here, only on Captain Adams VHS Pirate Ship Retro Reviews.